used in epidemiological mapping to study the spread of disease over geographic regions. Rapid text messaging is being used by UNICEF in Nigeria to monitor the supply and distribution of bed nets in the fight against malaria. A more well-known success story, the Ushahidi platform used crowdsourced information in Kenya to map incidents of violence post the last elections and has been adjusted and replicated in many different settings. UNDP is using crowdsourcing in its work on election monitoring and is exploring how these techniques can be applied for conflict prevention and early response to crises in other contexts. And UNAIDS is right now using crowdsourcing to develop a new strategy on youth and HIV. The Ushahidi success as a platform has also demonstrated how innovation from the Global South in East ICT can be replicated and expanded through South-South cooperation to have broader development impacts. And let me comment just very, very briefly on that. The strategies, policies, skills and expertise exchanged across the South are often those best suited to meeting the development challenges there. Innovations from the South will often offer solutions to problems which are overlooked by R&D processes in the North. Through ICTs, we can enhance knowledge and technology transfer of these new solutions. And at the same time, innovations from the South can also have important applications in the North and vice versa. By promoting ICT business startups in developing countries, we're able to tap into the tremendous wealth of creativity, energy and dynamism, especially among youth, and simultaneously reduce unemployment and create opportunities for young men and women to engage in markets outside their national borders. I see a huge global demand, for example, for digital content, whether it's from movies of all lengths, from the full feature, low budget, to the cell phone short films, and for digital games and other interactive software. Brilliant innovation in these areas will be found anywhere in the world where people have access to the basic tools and technologies. There are a number of notable public-private ICT initiatives which aim to capitalise on the tremendous potential in the South, and UNDP has been privileged to be part of some of them. For example, together with Cisco, been supporting the Government of South Africa to create the National eSkills Institute, which aims to build the skills base from which to generate new ICT-enabled jobs and strengthen innovation and R&D in the country. Similarly, when the Ministry of Communications of Ghana launched its ICT for Development initiative in 2005, UNDP, in addition to helping the government to design and implement the initiative, facilitated the creation of what is known as the Ghana Multimedia Incubator Centre, which is co-funded by us and the government, has partnered with IBM and Microsoft and provides mentoring, support and equipment and opportunities for young entrepreneurs to see their visions become reality. While recognising the critical role of ICT for development, we must consciously strive to see that the new technologies and their benefits can reach poor and rich, women and men, and young and old alike. Improvements in access to ICTs alone won't automatically reduce disparities or improve conditions for all, but it creates incredibly important platforms for doing so. As we move forward and build stronger partnerships between governments, development actors, private sector, civil society to meet the Millennium Development Goals, we can, as Goal 8 envisaged 11 years ago, use ICTs and cyberspace to advance sustainable development solutions which are scalable to reach very wide numbers of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Of the positive benefits for development of so many of the changes that we are seeing. And now I'm going to invite our second guest this morning, my colleague and friend in the European Union, Carl Bildt, the Swedish Foreign Minister and former Prime Minister of Sweden, to also address these topics, particularly the topic of freedom of expression. Carl, over to you.
Thanks very much, and it's truly a privilege to be able to join in addressing this gathering on such an important topic that affects us all. I was born in a world of 2.5 billion people, with most of them having virtually no hope whatsoever of getting out of their often desperate poverty. Today we are living in a world of 7 billion people. We are living in the most radical scientific and technological revolution that mankind has ever seen. And innovation and growth are creating new opportunities for virtually everyone around the world every day. A more open world economy, more open societies have lifted billions out of poverty and creating new hopes for further billions. We see a new wave demanding dignity and democracy sweeping through our world, and the internet is a very central part of this story. But the internet as we know it is only 2 decades old or so. And in these 2 decades, a very short time period indeed, the information and communication technologies have developed more rapidly and has affected our societies more deeply than I think really anyone could have foreseen. Science has turned fiction into reality. And if there's one prediction about the future that one can make with some certainty, it is that the coming decades will see even more radical, even more transformative developments in these respects. We are rapidly moving into a world of hyper-connectivity. In Stockholm, where I spend at least some part of my life, the demands for mobile bandwidth for communications is now doubling every 6 months. Just a week or so ago, I was sitting in a bar in New Delhi looking at the possibilities of a new cheap tablet that might bring virtually free internet connectivity to literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of Indians within a short period of time. We see countries in Africa leapfrogging entire technologies in order to bring new possibilities to even their remotest parts. I belong to those, as you can hear, that see enormous possibilities in the development that we are in the midst of. Access to information is empowering people across the world in a way we have never seen before. And as a result, we are also seeing a new wave of innovation and change in virtually every part of our societies and our different economies. It affects virtually everything. The digital sector will be key to the future economy, not only for a country like Sweden, but will impact the development of practically every country and every part of its economy. But it will also, of course, impact important political developments. There will be no hidden corners of our world any longer. There will be no dark spaces for any dark acts any longer. And it is only natural that issues of cyberspace are rapidly emerging also on the global political agenda. Our meeting here today is a clear sign of that. And this is, of course, very necessary. But a word of caution is called for as we are beginning a more political discussion about these issues. The internet has been developing as rapidly as we are all aware of during these decades, free of state interference, driven essentially by self-regulation and by a multi-stakeholder approach. This, I believe, has been an absolutely central part of the revolution that we've seen. It wasn't created by a committee. It wasn't set up by an international treaty. Like all of the other great innovation in the history of mankind, it was driven by the entrepreneurs and by the innovators, by the free spirit of free men, and we should be grateful for that. And we should also be careful accordingly not to interfere with what has produced that miraculous success of the past few decades. But as we now look forward, there are obviously issues that we need to address, and where we need to start to develop a more coherent global approach. One is certainly, as has been alluded to, the security issues. Once upon a time, the security of our societies was primarily a function of the security of our territories, and we had the armies on the borders securing our territories against invasion. But in this our age of accelerating globalization and emerging hyperconnectivity, the security and the strength of our societies is far more dependent on the security of the flows across the old boundaries. We need the robust, the secure, and the fast access to the global web and its information flow. Without it, societies and individuals will be left behind or face very serious problems indeed. And we need global norms and rules protecting these networks from interference, from disruption, and from destruction. The hyperconnected world creates also hyper-vulnerabilities that we individually must address more effectively. The immense flow of information will reflect the diversity and development of all of our societies in every respect. There will be bad behavior on the net, as there is bad behavior in our societies. But of at least the same concern as security should be the question of the freedom on the net for us that believe in the value of free society. Let's be clear, there's an increasing number of states taking action to limit the freedom of individuals on the net. In its dying days, we saw the Mubarak regime in Egypt cutting off the entire country from the net. In the future, I believe that this would stop the demands for change. If anything, it accelerated the process by illustrating the desperation of the regime, by suffocating the economy, and by forcing people onto the streets. This was an extreme case. But other regimes are increasingly using more sophisticated means. We see huge resources going into huge control systems. And we need to develop the international standards and safeguards in these respects. That is, I believe, a task that is urgent and imperative. In a report to the Human Rights Council, the Special Rapporteur on the freedom of expression noted that the freedom of opinion and expression is an enabler of virtually all other human rights, and that the Internet boosts not only the economic potential of nations, but also the political possibilities of society to develop. And it follows from that, he said, and I quote, "There should be as little restrictions as possible to the flow of information via the Internet, except in a few exceptional and limited circumstances prescribed by international human rights law. The full guarantee for the freedom of expression must be the norm, and any limitation must be considered an exception. This fundamental principle should never be reversed." This is a message that we have been worked on for some time, and we are having some success. There will be a special experts panel at the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. And indeed, if we look at the dialogue, the global consultations in the Internet Governance Forum, we see that the human rights issues figure far more prominently there now than they did in the past. And that is a testament to the fact that the tech community, the business community, governments and civil society increasingly recognize the link that must be there between the human rights issues, the development issues, and the security issues. This is imperative, both from the issue of the protection of human rights, but also for the protection of the net itself. A net that is stifled risks losing its vitality and its transformative powers. So then, we should be clear in our priorities. Security, essential. We need to do far more. but it must be linked